Three friends boarded Disney's Galactic Starcruiser to seek their destiny and emerged as heroes of the Halcyon.
Good journey, friends, and welcome to Heroes of the Halcyon, the best and only Galactic Starcruiser superfan podcast on the interwebs. I'm Galactic Starcruiser superfan Christine, and with me are
Superfan Martin
And superfan Drew.
Drew. Tell us about our episode.
We have two topics to talk about. The first thing is something we've been dying to share with you guys for the last several weeks. More about that in just a bit. And the second thing is our interview with Jen Catania of Eyre Cosplay. Jen is a LARPer, that stands for live action role player, from way back, and she's also a huge Star Wars fan. So when Galactic Starcruiser was announced, clearly this was right in her alley. Jen also shared with us a number of insights about Disney's next level dedication to their guests and their specific accessibility, mobility, and dietary needs. It's a great conversation, but first, let's talk about that surprise.
Well, a project that we have been working on for weeks is something we're so excited to finally start releasing into the wild. The Heroes of the Halcyon have created a series of in-universe videos introducing our characters that we're going to be bringing aboard the Halcyon to all of our listeners. And Drew, can you tell us a little bit about that?
I can. We were inspired to make these videos by the work that Mike Celestino did at laughingplace.com. He introduced his character Lodoko Fenman in a series of videos entitled Antiquities, and we thought this was such a fun idea that we wanted to do the same thing.
So with our second voyage coming up, we decided to do a deeper dive into our characters and really develop them before bringing them back aboard the Halcyon.
We're super excited for you guys to see these videos. Again, tune in on our YouTube channel, Heroes of the Halcyon, and we can't wait to hear what you think. And with that, let's hear from Jen. Well, Jen, thank you for joining us today. We're very excited to chat.
It is my pleasure. I think any time since I got off the Halcyon, when I'm not talking about the Halcyon, I want to be talking about the Halcyon. And it's so much fun to talk about it with people who've been. So I've been really looking forward to this.
Well, cool. We're excited as well. And of course, for those listening, we are going to put our spoilers toward the end. So no spoilers until we give you guys the warning. But Jen, we're going to start the way we always do. Can you tell us about your earliest Star Wars memory?
I was 5 years old. And I remember we had this really scratchy couch in our living room. And it was, I think, I don't know, it was wool or something. And I remember that square TV. I wonder how many of your listeners remember the struggle of trying to read the crawl on the square TVs. And I remember the Ewok forest. And I'm pretty sure that the only reason that's the scene I remember is because the previous year we'd actually gone to California and gone to the Redwoods. So all I remember, my first Star Wars memory is the Ewoks, the Redwoods, that Ewok village.
That's a good one. I love Return of the Jedi, and just seeing those Ewoks and their little yub-nub hearts just makes me feel warm inside.
There's just something so magical about Ewoks. And locally, one of my friends has an amazing Wicket, and anytime I get to troop with them and walk around and see everyone freak out when they see Wicket, it just brings me back to when I was 5 years old. It's just magic.
Yeah, the Yub Nub song probably played in my head rent-free for, 10 years after that movie. Goodness gracious.
At least.
Yeah. And then we did it in choir.
I mean, it's stopped now.
Yeah. Right, good point.
Until we started talking about it,
now,
and it's back.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your favorite Star Wars medium? We like to throw out movie, TV, books, comics.
I love it all, except for video games, because I am not good at video games, but movies for me are always going to be my first love. I think especially now when there's so many distractions, when you go into a movie theater, you have to put your phone down. So many of the movies, I can still remember exactly where I was. Revenge of the Sith. I remember I was in college in Boston. We saw it on an IMAX, and just the collective gasp when 3-story tall Yoda flipped across the screen. It was just amazing. And seeing the re-releases, I was just born when Return of the Jedi came out. So I didn't see any of the original in theaters until the re-releases. But I just remember never thinking I was going to be able to see the films in theaters. And then I got to see the re-releases in theaters with my dad, with my mom. And then the prequels came out. And then a couple years ago, I got to see The Rise of Skywalker at the premiere out in Hollywood.
Oh, wow.
At the Dolby Theater. I was in the third row.
Wow.
And I was sitting next to a guy with an amazing Kylo Ren. So I'm in Hoth Leia, which was handy because it was freezing in that theater. But I'm like looking up, third row, you can't beat that experience. I will say my close second is the books, because I mean you all remember that time when there was no new Star Wars. We had the books. Right. I spent all my babysitting money in middle school and junior high on the books, and that is always my second love. And before I went on the Halcyon, I re-listened to so many audiobooks. I reread so many books. I love the movies, but the books, and I'm a teacher. My degree's in English. I love reading, and it's just, we're so lucky to be living in a time when we get so much Star Wars in so many forms. Anytime I get more Star Wars, I'm happy, and I'm so excited to see what else is going to come and what else I'm going to want to make to wear, hopefully on my next Starcruiser.
Well, it's fun you mentioned Starcruiser. When did you first hear about the Starcruiser experience?
So I probably first heard about it. I think they talked about it at Star Wars Celebration in 2019, but I was recovering from a concussion, so I don't really remember that much. But what I really remember is when they first released information on the pricing, and people were very angry and had a lot of opinions. And I've done costumes for community theater and high school theater. I've directed plays. I've LARPed for a decade. And when I looked at the pricing, I wasn't surprised, but it's expensive. And especially, I mean, we all got to see all of those costumes, all of the special effects, all the makeup up close. That's not cheap. Again, I remember when people were so angry about the price, it's like, well, if you want the kind of flawless, spot on, completely immersive experience, I don't see how they could have done it any cheaper.
Me neither.
Like, I wish they could have. I wish I could do it more often. I wish more people could go, but.
Well, Jen, when was your voyage on Galactic Starcruiser?
We boarded 1 month ago. We boarded on August 22nd. And I this morning I had a conversation with my husband, because I was listening to past episodes from you all, and things were refreshing my memory. And I said to him, okay, when we did that thing at that point, who was there and what was happening? And he said, I have no idea. So I've been trying to kind of go through, look at the pictures we took, my screen caps from the messages, the schedule, which absolutely, if people don't know, make sure you take screen caps of all of your messages in your itinerary. You can record the screen to do that. And this is something, as a LARPer, I knew to do, that I was going to need to try to refresh my memory, because human memory is really weird. And you have an experience and you think you're going to remember stuff, but you don't. You have to help yourself with that. You have to take notes if you can. You have to take pictures. The pictures will jog your memory. But it was only a month ago, but I still haven't fully thought about all of it. I still haven't fully processed it.
Well, from an operational standpoint, you mentioned screenshot the messages, and that's so key. Now, did you use your own phone as the data pad, or did you use the Disney-provided smartphone as the data pad?
I used my own phone. I actually upgraded my phone late in the spring because I didn't want to have any issues.
Okay.
Because I wanted the best camera I could. I wanted to not have any issues. And I gave my husband my old 11 Pro. So if they still, in theory, have the loaner phones, but I wouldn't count on it. And honestly, for this kind of experience, if you are due for an upgrade for your phone, do it, because you don't want to have bugs. You want the best battery life. And make sure you know how to screen record a video. One of my middle school students taught me this 2 years ago, because there's a lot going on. And what I just did at dinner the second night is I pulled up messages, I pulled up stuff, and I hit screen record, and I slowly scrolled through as I was waiting for my next course. Because at some point after you disembark, everything disappears, and you don't want to lose that.
I can say one of the things that I really wish I did was actually write some things down right after the voyage, because it just starts disappearing after a while. Some of these little details that, so that when we go on our second voyage, I'm definitely going to learn from that one. But can you tell us a little bit about your group, family, friends, both?
So I went with my husband, and I really wanted to try to figure out a time to go with friends. We have a lot of friends who are into LARPing, a lot of friends who are in the costuming clubs, but I was impatient and I didn't want to wait for people we knew who had the budget and who had a schedule that worked with my school vacations. Because if anyone's a teacher or has kids and are trying to go on that schedule, it's not great. So in one of the Legion Facebook groups, someone was talking about it and a woman commented on a post, and I had said, I want to go. We haven't found a roommate. She said, well, are you in the roommate finder group for the Starcruiser? And I said, yeah, I hadn't really looked seriously. But then I started talking with her, and she had another woman she'd met because they were going to go in an earlier group, but that group fell through. And I started chatting with them, and they were awesome. And we were ready to go. We booked, and we had so much fun. It's like summer camp for adults. And it's really one of those things, you spend so little time in your cabin. We're used to sharing an actual cabin in the woods with other adults at LARP events. So it wasn't really a big deal, especially because it makes it so much more affordable. I think my husband actually spent more time hanging out and going to the bar with one of our roommates than he actually spent with me, because he was doing a lot more scoundrel stuff early on. Because I'm not much of a drinker, and you really don't have to be to have a good time. But the two of them were definitely getting in trouble, and I don't know exactly what kind of scoundrelly things they were getting up to, but they had a lot of fun. And it's really like summer camp. You make these friends and they're your friends forever. They're stuck with you. And I think my husband and I can be very entertaining. We're not trying to be, but one of our roommates was like, yeah, probably about 15 to 20% of my fun was just watching you two.
I absolutely love the summer camp for adults.
Mm-hmm.
That's
so
the best analogy ever. What kind of prep did you do before your trip? Did you go in spoiler free, or did you kind of read some articles, watch some videos, or?
For the most part, for Star Wars media, I don't want spoilers. I mean, I'll watch trailers, but I really I've done a really good job of culling my friends list that after I watched Andor and started scrolling through Facebook, I didn't see anybody spoiling anything. So I'm very much against spoilers. But for the Starcruiser, I wanted to be prepared. When you're looking at something that's so expensive, that's potentially a once-in-a-lifetime experience, which I feel like a lot of us say, and then we get off. And we're like, figure out how to do that again.
Right.
Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, yeah. So I wanted to be prepared. I listened to, I think, 2 of your podcasts before, what you want to know before, what I wish I knew.
Yeah.
And maybe one more. But a big thing I did to prepare was I joined, there's a ton of Facebook groups that are giving tips and suggestions. Those were really, really key. For me, especially, there's a Facebook group, Traveling for All, about the Starcruiser. I actually
I don't know that one.
Moderate now.
Oh, okay.
That's talking about various accessibility pieces. For me, I joined specifically about food allergies, but as my mobility issues continued, that was a big resource for me. So for anyone who's traveling with any sort of accessibility needs, you have to prepare, and that's a really great resource. The other thing, I wanted to add up all my numbers to see how much time I spent sewing to prepare for this, but I lost where I was at. I spent hundreds of hours sewing and making costumes for my husband, for myself, between researching. I had many existential crises because I just couldn't decide what design, what vibe I was going for, because I didn't want to wear, I think there's a Rodney Dangerfield movie where he's like, my wife's got 3 closets full of nothing to wear. That is me in Star Wars, but I wanted to wear something different. So a lot of it for getting into it for me was, what am I going to wear? How is it going to work for not dying of heat on Batu? How is it going to work with my knee? Because my knee's a mess. And how is it going to look really, really cool? And how am I going to find enough time to make something for my husband so he looks really cute and he's comfortable too? So a lot of my preparation was figuring out that costuming piece. And for me, that was a big part of the fun. And I think if you divide out how many waking hours you spend on the Halcyon and how much it costs per hour, for me, I feel like I can also divide out all those hours I spent sewing because I love sewing. I mean, sometimes I hate it, but I loved it. And during that time while I was sewing, I was also listening to and often re-listening to a ton of Star Wars audiobooks. I love the audiobooks, and so much of just my whole Star Wars sewing closets in general was made while I was listening to audiobooks, because I don't like watching TV shows while sewing because you miss everything.
Yeah.
You don't see the visuals. But the Princess and the Scoundrel by Beth Revis, which just came out right before I trip, I was literally listening to the last part of it while I was frantically trying to pack up our room at the Pop Century to transfer over to the Halcyon. That, honestly, that book for me was kind of my most meaningful preparation. I think my most meaningful non-traditional preparation.
Sure.
And we'll get to that in the spoilers part. I'm not going to spoil the book, but it connects and there's spoilers. The big things that I did on my own were the Facebook posts, reading articles, ignoring a lot of the cranky people who obviously had never actually been on it.
Right. Had an axe to grind. Yeah.
And then my travel agent, Naomi, was a huge resource because she'd been on it the voyage before. And she also is a costumer. And she was also someone I could bounce things off of, like, okay, is this kind of costume gonna work? And we have a lot of the same costumes for characters we have. So I could say, well, you've worn this costume. Would you want something like that? So because I talked to her, I was like, I'm not going to put a train on anything I'm wearing. And also because I talked to her, I knew that if I wanted to change things up, I'd want to have something easy to swap out.
Right.
So I think you've interviewed travel agent. This is something, just get a travel agent.
Oh,
it doesn't cost you extra.
100%.
They'll share information.
Yep. We're giving Sarah a call next time for sure.
Yes, we are. So let's get on the Halcyon. So what was your first reaction when you walked into the atrium?
I was that 5-year-old girl again. And for me, I've had a lot of health stuff going on these past 2 years. So for me, being able to step onto a ship that embodies one of the things I love most in this world, just the stories, but also the friends I've made because of Star Wars were all there with me in my heart when I saw this ship, where I could just forget about everything in the world and just do a Star Wars. Just forget about everything else. Just live in my imagination. And as adults, whenever we get that chance to stop worrying about those real life stresses and start stressing about fake stuff, that's the best. I mean, any LARPer knows, we go to an event and you are stressed because your character might die, all your character's best friends might die, and you go into this event knowing that you're going to be telling these stories that are so immersive that you are going to sob, you're going to cry, you're going to have your heart broken, but you're also going to have these cathartic moments where you get to really enjoy that full breadth of human emotions. And I walked on the Halcyon and I knew that I was going to have the ultimate live action role-playing experience, because I'm used to doing that at a summer campsite where I'm pretending I'm walking around a Weird West town, or I'm pretending I'm in a Middle Earth type setting, or I'm pretending I'm in a futuristic dystopia. But you still see the handprints painted by the summer campers. But you don't remember that stuff when you're at a regular LARP. You remember the emotions. You remember how your friends wrote plots that just destroyed you. You remember how you destroyed your friends emotionally. And when you walk on the Halcyon, you don't have to use your imagination for the setting. You don't have to use your imagination for the costumes. I know a lot of my LARPer friends were really worried that people in regular clothes were going to take them out of the immersion. And honestly, I couldn't describe to you what someone who wasn't in costume was wearing. You just tune it out. The same way, if you're a LARPer, you tune out the camp blah, blah, blah. Don't feed the bears. You tune all that out. And it's the emotions that stick with you. And I think the magic of the Halcyon is that the setting and the cast members, they make it easy for those of us who are adults and have maybe forgotten how to have that childhood wonder. They make it easy for that to come back.
Yeah, I wish I would have called you before we went, because I was not prepared at all.
Yeah, I still haven't finished listening to the audiobook for The Rise of Skywalker because I got to a certain point. I couldn't keep listening to the part where Leia dies. I couldn't. And I still have that audiobook in my account, and I just can't do it because it's not just a movie for us. The themes, the characters, we've grown up with them. And I think what's also so incredible about the Halcyon is we see a few familiar folks, but there's people who aren't in movies, and we love them, and we're willing to do anything. We're willing to do spoilers.
Right. Nicely done. That was impressive.
That was fabulous.
Well, so it's funny because so we have a friend, Patty, who's going to be joining us, and hopefully, Patty, you're listening. We enjoy talking to you on the episodes every once in a while. And what's going to be fun is we're going to walk on the ship, and the three of us are just going to be bawling like babies, and just completely, I'm back, I can't believe it. And Patty's going to be like, all right, I'll see you guys later.
Yeah. I'll wait till spoilers, but there were a number of points where the only reason I was able to hold it together is I've LARPed as multiple characters who put on that stiff upper lip. And as that character said, I am holding it together. But it was a lot of practice was the only reason I held it together. And I think next time I go, because that needs to happen, I want to play a different character where I can just sob and have that catharsis on the ship, because there's a reason we go to movies we know are going to make us cry. It's not an unpleasant thing. And I love Facebook groups. So there's another Facebook group that I helped start called Galactic Starcruiser Drop, because a lot of people, especially people who aren't LARPers, don't realize that these emotions we feel on ship and getting off after the ship, those are big emotions, and they're one of the best parts of it. But people who don't LARP and people who haven't done theater are not prepared for it. And that's something for me. If I hadn't known that the day after I got off the ship, when Disney sent the survey, like, tell us about some experiences you like, I was sitting in the bathroom, the spare bathroom at my parents' house, typing up some of the things that happened that were amazing, like bawling. I was trying to keep quiet to not wake up my parents and have them wonder what is wrong with our daughter. She just gets back from Disney World and she's sobbing. but that's what happens, and it's not a bad thing. It's one of the things from LARPing that I kind of missed about the Halcyon. At LARPing, typically on Sunday afternoon, after game off is called, everyone, they might still be in half in makeup and costume, but everyone comes out together and there's a closing meeting and you get a chance to talk to your friends. If any of my friends are listening to me, to this, which I'm sure some of them are, but if I'm writing plot, and I've written some plots for my friends' characters who are the players to interact with, where I just put them through the emotional ringer. So when you go through that, and I made them cry a lot in character, or they made me cry a lot. Having that moment afterwards where you're both yourself again, you're not the character, and you can come together and say, "Oh, I can't believe you did that. You're evil," and they're like, "Yeah." It's a closure piece that LARP does really well that you don't get with the Halcyon. You might see some friends of the characters like a post you make on social media, but you don't get that closure. And on the flip side, those actors, the cast members, they don't get to see that applause. I'm doing air quotes, but it's a podcast. Imagine the air quotes. They don't get to see that full impact of the emotions that I get to see, that my friends get to see when we come together after a weekend of LARPing. They also don't get the same kind of applause at the end where you're applauding the person, not what the character did. So I hope that all of the amazing cast members, I hope they realize how much what they do means to us, because I've been to LARP events where the cast are incredible. They make the event. The Halcyon would be nothing if it weren't for the cast members. You could have the most beautiful building, you could have the most incredible food, but the heart of this experience is the cast members, and how, I mean, it is so challenging when you have a plot, when you have facts you have to deliver, you have lines, you have things information you have to get across, and you have to improv, and you have to make sure that people are having a good time. I've definitely written plot details on my arm and had one of the players afterwards say, "Do you have a tattoo? Did that character have a tattoo?" And it's like, no, I just couldn't remember all these different names of things.
This means George killed Millie. Sorry. That's all it means.
Yeah. It's just like, no, that was nothing. That wasn't a plot detail. But and the other thing is, a lot of these cast members play multiple roles. And the more I go back and think about the experience, the more amazed I am, because they all bring themselves to it, but they all create these characters in this story. And it sounds like, from reading and seeing other experiences, they've evolved certain things with the different characters. Like, I think there's some like romances between certain people who weren't necessarily there before. And it's just magical. And I really want to go back as soon as I can.
Yeah. I love the fact that you said that everybody thinks it's going to be a once in a lifetime experience, because it just isn't. It just can't be. You have to go back.
And I think thinking, people listening to this who haven't been, you might want to start thinking about little ways you can give a little bit of a thank you that in essence is a nod to those cast members. A lot of people bring things to give away, and we can talk more about it later. But so I mentioned I got to go to the Rise of Skywalker premiere in 2019. And for that, I made handkerchiefs that I gave away to the other people, because I knew I was going to cry. I knew I was going to sob. I was going to ugly cry during that movie, and I did. But I made these handkerchiefs. I had a custom stamp made that said, "No one's ever really gone. The Force will be with you always." I knew I wanted to give something to the characters, but that was really a gift for the cast members, because the character can't keep it because they're a character. So when I was on the ship, I was able to kind of find a way for a lot of the characters and a lot of the awesome staff in the gift shop as well to say, "Hey, I know things are really tough right now." That's not a spoiler. We know things are tough in the galaxy at that point. And I said, but my character, I went by Zen, but my character was a fashion historian and fashion designer. So I said, I made these handkerchiefs, and I wanted to give you one because things are tough, and I'm thinking of you. But it was a really great way to kind of jumpstart those conversations with those characters. And I'll talk about one of them in the spoiler section. But if you can come up with something, if you can come up with something that works with your character's story, or even just something that's just sweet and sincere, however, I think they appreciate that. You hear stories on social media from cast members, the former cast members on TikTok, who really appreciate that sort of thing. So I highly recommend it, because there's not many ways we can say thank you to them other than by being really nice to them.
Right.
But that's one I definitely recommend.
I love it. When you first got on board, did you end up doing the tour of the ship?
We did. So, Naomi, our travel agent, recommended we do that. It's not that big a space, but I've gotten lost using 2 GPSs in my car. So I definitely was happy to have the tour. My husband's going to laugh when he listens to this. Everyone on the ship is in character, and our tour guide was hilarious. There was a room that was open that she was very insistent should not have been open. People shouldn't have been walking in and out of that room. Why were they? And that was just that moment. I was like, okay, we've arrived. This is amazing. And it helps get your bearings as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. The ship is small, but you're also so overwhelmed by everything that it would be important to get that kind of, okay, where am I at? Where's my room? That kind of thing. So that makes perfect sense.
My husband was talking to one of the cast members on the ship complaining about getting lost. And they said something to him to the effect of, yeah, imagine if you could go on all the other floors. There's only 4 floors that passengers can access,
right.
Which just cracked him up because there's not that many. I don't know how many actual floors are in the building. You do get your bearings. I didn't get lost much after the first day or two. The last morning, I didn't get lost at all.
Where's the elevator? I'll stay over there. Okay, I'm
good. Did you or your group do a CSL photo shoot?
We did. And it was, I don't regret it for a second. It was amazing. We did 2 sessions back to back because I really wanted to do one session with just my husband and I, so we could get really cute photos that would be really awkward if our roommates were just over there watching us channel our inner Han and Leia. So Naomi recommended that we do them the afternoon, the second day, come back from Batu a little early. And the time slots, in theory, I wanted to do a costume change to have 2 separate costumes. But the time slots she found were back to back. And I realized that was better because then I wasn't going to lose a half hour or an hour changing. Mm-hmm. But what really impressed me with our team is there's one location where I said, I want to kind of do that on the Falcon when Han kind of comes over before C-3PO interrupts them. They didn't have references or anything. And they posed us so perfectly. I mean, everyone in the Halcyon loves Star Wars. It's so clear. Like they knew exactly what I wanted. And because I'm used to posing people quickly and moving people around, and my husband's used to me bossing him around. I love you, honey. You're the best. We were really efficient, and we got a lot of photos in the section, the half hour that was just us. So if you're going to split your time between 4 people, I think you can have up to 8 people. You do need to adjust your expectations. Oh, and the other thing, figure out what you're going to wear for your photo shoot and get pictures of yourself in it from various angles before you bring it to the Halcyon. Move around, see what's going to shift around. If there's a piece like a belt or an accessory that has a tendency to shift and look weird, mention that to the photographer and the assistant so they can keep an eye out. But if there's something specific, mention that. And you also want to make sure you're comfortable, you like how you look, and just enjoy it.
This is super useful because when we were on the Halcyon in 2.5 weeks, we have 2 back-to-back sessions, day 2 afternoon, just like you did. So I'm glad to hear that it worked out for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely bring, if you have a cape or some kind of accessory you can swap out quickly, do that. It's fun to have it kind of look like you had 2 different outfits when you really didn't. If you have a cape, not everyone has a basement full of capes, I realize.
Well, the cool people do, right?
Well, exactly. Now I want a cape.
Now I want a cape too. Come on. I'm trying to, in my head, I'm like, well, Zoran Vox, he might wear a cape for nightwear, so that would work.
There you go.
Jokes are cool, but
fancy dinner,
yeah.
Need a cape.
I need a cape. I
don't need a reason to wear a cape. I just want to wear a cape.
Yeah, just wear a cape.
No, I mean real life.
Yeah, right. I'm Martin. I'm your caped realtor. So, Jen, let's talk about the food on the Halcyon. What was your experience with the food?
It was amazing. And let me also, anyone who knows me, who's listening to this, well, no, my husband is an incredible, incredible cook. He is such a good cook that when we got married in church, and we had the minister over for dinner, and Dr. John looked at my husband and says, look, if you don't marry her, I'll marry you. Your cooking is so good. Like he cooks at LARPs now. There's people who will go to the 2 LARPs he cooks at just to eat his cooking. So I'm used to incredible food. He's a foodie. That being said, I have food allergies up the wazoo. There are very few restaurants that I trust to let me eat safely. So I have non-celiac gluten sensitivity. And on top of that, I'm also ridiculously sensitive to cross-contamination. I'm the canary in the coal mine. I've gotten sick when other people with non-celiac gluten sensitivity have been completely fine. And on top of that, I also get sick from eating rice, which is in basically every single gluten-free substitute in existence. And I also get sick from sunflower seeds and sunflower seed oil. But Disney in general is incredible. I didn't stress at all eating on in the parks or on the Halcyon. But beyond that, the food they made for me was so good that a couple times one of my roommates was like, I almost want to lie and say I have allergies so I can get that, because they did a fantastic job. When I booked, I filled out the allergy form, and my travel agent sent that in. I think there's a couple points where you reach out to special dining, and I was definitely stressed about it, because for me, if I get a crumb or like a crumb touches my food and then the crumb disappears and I think I'm safe, it'll ruin my week. So I was worried about it. But once I was on the ship, I went and I talked to the chef, I just stopped stressing about it. So one of the things, if you have food allergies, make sure, I'd say get there at noon so you're ready to board right at 1 o'clock. You don't want to have to miss out on fun exploring. You want to minimize how much time you're going to miss out on exploring because you're dealing with your stupid food allergy stuff. Mm-hmm. The chef on our last morning, because they see the list, they see the notes of what your allergies are. Because I can't do the gluten-free waffles or pancakes because rice flour. Mm-hmm. He actually, I guess, looked up a recipe for almond flour pancakes that he made just for me, and they were so good.
Wow.
Nice.
And for the table service meals for dinner, everything was amazing. That's funny. The only time I had any concerns about anything was one thing they brought out for me that was so good. I was like, wait, it was breaded in something that was safe for me, or crispy. And I had this moment of, this is so good. Wait, this can't be this good. It's got to have gluten. It's way too good. But it was fine.
It is amazing how accommodating they are with no qualms, no second thoughts, we're going to have to go through this. They're just, whatever we can do to make your experience excellent, that's what we're going to do.
So you mentioned that there was some accessibility concerns, and how did that kind of factor into your Halcyon adventure, and how did Disney kind of accommodate that?
Yeah. So just kind of the biggest accessibility thing for me, when I was early on planning, besides the food allergies, I have sleep apnea, which means my body's like, hey, I'm just going to stop breathing at night, which isn't ideal. So I joke with people that I come with my own Darth Vader sound machine. But the bonus with it is if you use a CPAP machine, you don't snore. Because that was one of my big things when we were looking for roommates is I have sleep issues up the wazoo. I need to be able to sleep. If someone uses a CPAP machine, great, but snoring, no. So one concern was there going to be enough room on the little tiny tables to put the CPAP machine? Were there going to be enough plugs? There's not enough plugs. Bring a extension for sure. And if you have people in your cabin with sleep apnea, make sure that you plan so they have a lower cabin, because I wouldn't, unless you have, there's certain travel machines that could work with a battery on the top bunk, but it's not going to work. In terms of other accessibility, I thought about, as I was preparing with costuming, you really need to think about how what you're wearing is going to affect your health and your comfort. I learned the hard way at Star Wars Celebration in Anaheim that a costume that's comfortable at waist standing up is probably going to be too tight if I'm sitting down in a mobility scooter most of the day. So I knew to think about that when I was making my belt for the Starcruiser. I knew that I'm very sensitive to heat. So for my back, and I sunburn like nobody's business. So I knew for Batu, I wanted something that was lightweight. I used linen on my core area. I had a hooded lightweight linen cape that helped protect me from the sun. And I also learned the hard way that I rolled over the drapey parts of that a lot with the mobility scooter. But people were really great. They kept warning me, and it ended up working out. But the other thing I will say for folks worried about the heat, what I realized after the fact, that kind of a side bonus of not being able to walk long distances without pain and needing that mobility scooter, was my heat tolerance was a lot better. I still drank a ton of water, but I didn't overheat like I normally have at other LARPs when it's hot out, because that helped me. And in terms of that mobility accessibility, it's, especially if you're someone who's newer to having mobility issues, it can be really hard to kind of realize and admit to yourself that you need to use tools to help you through your mobility. And it was hard for me to realize, no, I really do need to rent the mobility scooter. It was hard for me when I started using a cane walking around. I did modify some 3D printed files so my cane looked like a lightsaber, which made it a lot more fun. And that's, I shared that file on Thingiverse. I still have some other lightsaber ones I need to put up there. And it's a folding cane too, so I could collapse it down on rides. And someone pointed out to me that when it's folded and I kind of shake it to take it out, it's almost like a lightsaber extending.
That's cool.
So make things fun. My mobility scooter, I'll explain why I'm trying not to crack up here, but I had a porg that I kind of hand sewed to a cable lock that I tied to that I locked the front of the basket. I do, one of my cosplays is a Cruella de Vil, but with porgs on a coat mashup. So I'm used to doing things that upset small children with porgs because they see the coat and they're just like,
Wait a
one of my
minute.
friends is like, "You're gonna wear that on the house?" And I'm like, I'm not gonna traumatize the children who are in a confined space with me. But I had the porg in the front of the basket, and it was really fun because I'd see looks from kids as I rode around. It was fun. The accessibility on the Halcyon itself is fantastic. I only had maybe 2 slight complaints. One that was, if I pushed the elevator button a couple times, the elevator would come open and it would be too late for me to get into it. It took a little time. What's nice, if you've ever tried to get a mobility scooter into a hotel room and then maybe cut the corner wrong and maybe took a chunk out of the door and then your husband's judging you for it. It's nice because I'm not saying that's ever happened to me. But what's nice is they have parking spaces for the mobility scooters in the hallway, and there's charging stations. I wish they put us in a cabin closer to that, because if my knee had been flaring up really badly, I would have had to have somebody go pick it up for me, but it worked out okay for me. And then the only other thing, which I guess I'll maybe talk about a little more in the spoiler section, is if your knees are cranky, be careful with lightsaber training, and also be aware that there's helping certain folks that involves going upstairs and chasing people around that you're going to have to opt out of. Because one time I forgot myself, went down a flight of stairs, and regretted my life choices.
I could see in the heat of the moment why you would do that, though.
Right.
I mean, trust me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there's far more accessibility pieces than I could talk about. I'm talking about my experience, and these are all different for every single person. But definitely, if someone has any kind of accessibility concern, join that Facebook group. And just my biggest advice for accessibility is, if you think you might need a certain accommodation or a certain tool, if it's even in your head, don't even hesitate, utilize it, because we all have so much internalized ableism. We all think, oh, I look fine, I should be fine. No, if you're even thinking and wondering if you're going to be fine, you're not fine. And it takes a lot to get there. And I'm telling all of you listening, not all of you, those of you who are listening, who are having those thoughts, just do what you need to be in less pain and to enjoy your time.
Yes, love it. Can you tell us the name again of the Facebook group?
It's Traveling for All. I think it's from Traveling for All from Jawa to Java, I think.
Love it. Okay, good. Yeah, want to make sure everybody got that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about accessibility, mobility. costuming. Let's tie all that in a little bit to LARPing and how your extensive experience in LARPing assisted your experience on the ship.
Yeah. So a big part of it, it helped me know how to emotionally prepare. It also helped me be, I think, a little less stressed about the experience. I was, to be fair, I was very stressed. I had in my head, like, I hadn't LARPed in a while because LARPs were shut down locally a lot for COVID. And then my knee got really bad. So I had to miss a couple games. In my head, I was like, oh no, have I forgotten how to play pretend?
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to say something to me? And I'm just going to be like, hello there, I am Jen and I am an earth person, human. But I knew that I think a big part of it was I knew how a backstory works in how you approach a character. I knew that I wanted to, for this, the first time on the Halcyon, I wanted to play a character who was really solidly based in me. And I knew I wanted to pull from myself to in my experiences to build that character. And I wanted to pull from things that I had done or knew about in reality. So I love making Star Wars costumes. I've played LARP characters. I played a LARP character in a like a storybook where you'd have like Peter Pan and Robin Hood as characters. I played a tailor in that world. So I said, okay, I want to be a fashion historian. Kind of like in my head, I was like Indiana Jones, but for clothes.
Okay.
and like Padme's wardrobe and Leia's wardrobe. Like that was me. And one of my the outfit I wore on the plane was kind of that inspired in my head. But I knew I wanted to pull that aspect of me because I'd played that character. Her name was Mariah. I played that character and was able to talk about sewing and making garments and have an opportunity whenever an NPC, a non-player character, so a staff character, walked up. I always had something to talk about with them. I could compliment their clothes. I could try to sell them my services. I could try to work for them. I had that in. And as a LARPer, you get, they talk about recognizing plot. You see someone random walk by and you get this sixth sense going, all right, there's something cool that's going to happen there. And it can make it easier to have a way to interact, to break the ice, if your character has a reason. And I think there've been other people who've gone in the Halcyon who were characters who had that kind of clothing background. So that was something I knew I was going to draw on. I also, and this is something folks with D&D will relate to as well. I also kind of knew I wanted to channel a fancy British lady I played at a Weird West alternate history LARP, where I wore full on 1870s, early 1880s clothing in New England in the spring and fall. So, and somehow never got heat exhaustion doing that, but I knew that I could still have fun if I was wearing an elaborate, ridiculous costume. And I knew that going all out with costuming was something that I was going to enjoy. From that character, I also knew how much fun it is to kind of play nice to the evil people and be very polite and try to see how far you can go. Because that was a character where she kind of played it oblivious, like she didn't know that she was actually helping, basically the equivalent of, I mean, it was the British Empire in that version. But knowing how much fun it can be to kind of play dumb with certain characters, like, oh, you're doing blah, blah, blah. Oh, I tried to help you with that thing, but I just couldn't help it. So having those experiences with playing those characters and knowing what I enjoyed. On the flip side, there's characters that I've played in a way that I enjoyed at a LARP where I was paying maybe $80 for a weekend that I wouldn't enjoy paying a lot more in the Halcyon. I had one character who was the commander of the defense force, the little army. And I had so much fun tormenting myself by playing that character so true to what she would have done and having fun at doing what she would have done rather than what I found fun. So I would stand out in the dark for 2 hours on watch. Nobody was, I mean, people would come out, but that's not fun. But because I was in that, her name was Blue, because I wanted an easy character. I didn't want a ridiculous name. So her name was just like the color blue. But I would just stand out there and just stare and watch. And I would just emotionally torture myself with that character, doing what she would have done, doing the things that weren't actually fun because I wanted to. I don't recommend doing that on Halcyon. If you've never LARPed, if you've never done role play or D&D, figure out how to make a character that's close to yourself. So if someone says, "Oh, I noticed you're wearing Alderanian fashion," you could say, "Oh yes, I've studied Alderanian fashion," and you go into that. But think about what's going to be fun for you. But also, and we'll talk about this in the spoiler thing, don't be completely set on what you're going to do. Have a ballpark, have your backstory, use your backstory to inform your choices, but don't expect to necessarily tell anyone that. But in your head, if someone asks you to help with blah, 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 you can use that backstory to say, okay, what part of me, what would this version of me do? And then do it. Or also say, well, I'd never do that. But you know what? This character today that I'm playing, they totally would. They'll do that, hold my ale and run off in the sunset. When I heard about the Halcyon, I said, I need to do that because I want that. I mean, we all love Star Wars. We love Star Wars. Getting a chance to just go be a hero in Star Wars for the weekend, it's the ultimate. It doesn't take away from the LARPing that I do and continuing to do. It is especially amazing to me right now because I've had to miss the past 2 local LARPs I should have gone to because my knee got so messed up I couldn't do it. And I spent both of those weekends thinking I could have done this on the Halcyon. I could have used the mobility scooter. I could have taken the elevator. This would have been accessible to me. There's so many emotions around LARPing. There's so many emotions around the Halcyon, but for folks who are maybe listening to this and the Halcyon's not financially accessible to them at this point, go look up your local LARPs because if you're willing to use your imagination, you can have that emotional experience without having to spend so much money. And then eventually, if you are able to go on the Halcyon, you're going to have a better experience on the Halcyon because you're used to just letting go and having fun and losing yourself in that experience. And you're also going to be better prepared for the emotional fallout you're going to experience.
And you will.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Fallout is putting it nicely.
Well, now I think it's time to put on the spoiler alert. So for those of you who are listening and don't want to be spoiled on any future excitement on the Halcyon, this is your chance to turn off the podcast. We've enjoyed having you, but the rest of us is for the cool kids.
Come back later.
So Jen, who was the first character you interacted with when you got on the Halcyon?
Wani was, I freaked out. I freaked out so badly when I met Wani that I called her Gaia, which she very graciously forgave me for.
That's great.
And then I tried to make it up to her because I gave her one of those handkerchiefs I made, but I was just like, I knew Wani was going to speak Huttese. I knew it was gonna, to interact with Wani, you kind of had to just improvise, but I was just so overwhelmed and amazed with how amazing and perfect Wani is. I just fangirled a little too close to the sun and just crashed and burned and called her Guy. She was so nice. Like I talked to her for a bit and Wani was so cool. I didn't get to interact with Wani much after that, but it was just I was starstruck.
That's cool. When you got on the ship, did you know anything, since you tried to stay away from spoilers, did you know anything about the paths that were available? And this is my turn to air quote for the podcast. Did you know about the paths?
Yeah, I knew about the paths. In terms of spoilers, what I mainly tried to avoid was conclusions. I didn't want to hear about the endings of paths or big things on the paths. I knew what all the paths were. I knew Chewie was going to show up. I knew that there was going to be a Rey and Kylo Ren battle. And obviously, based on what happens with the Rise of Skywalker, everything ends up. But I didn't know the ending things. So I knew that the characters, I knew that I could kind of get a jump start into various stories by talking and by really going up to certain characters, which was a big part of why I made those handkerchiefs, because I wanted to hit the ground running. I wanted to start off I wanted to get as much plot. That's what we call it in LARPing. We call it plot, those interactions. I wanted to get as much plot as possible through role play and not have to have it come through the data pad, because that's what I really love. I like talking to people. I like interacting. I like role playing until I just bawl and lose it. And that really made my experience amazing. It wasn't doing the missions. It was the interactions with the characters and just being a person they could tell was there to play. I was yes and. They asked me to do something. They said, hey, do you want to jump? I'd say how high, but not really literally jumping because I can't jump, but I will emotionally jump.
Right. What path did you end up taking the most?
So I wanted to go Jedi and Resistance. I really wanted Jedi. I have a gorgeous Leia hilt from KR Sabers that my friend installed, and I wore it on my belt the first day. I wanted to send that signal like Jedi me up. I want that. Right. And Resistance too, obviously. But Wraith and Gaia, I didn't want to go smuggler. I was going to let my husband do all that smuggler stuff, but you can't resist Wraith and Gaia.
No, you can't.
You can't. You really can't. It's impossible. Anyone who can, they probably have training in resisting, I don't know, like mind control.
Yeah.
They're just, it was just, they make you feel like you're the only person in the room. They make you feel like they need you. And you know Wraith is going off and having the same conversation, but they're just so good about it. And I think, there's people do a lot of talking about just costuming help, does stuff help? I mean, my first interaction with Lieutenant Croy is, and I was trying to do the charm thing a little bit, and he looks me up and down. And I'm wearing all white. Anyone can see in the promo. You could tell I was very Alderaanian fashion inspired. He looks me up and down. He says, Alderaanian fashion. At least that planet had some positive contribution to the galaxy. And I was in my head, I'm like, Lieutenant Croy recognized the fashion influences that I very carefully picked out so that it was inspired, but not a copy. And but I was like, I don't like you, but I'm going to pretend like I like you for a while.
So you didn't tell him beforehand that it was Alderaanian fashion? He just picked up on it?
Oh, he picked up on it. Yeah.
They're the best.
That's
I couldn't tell you Alderaanian fashion, so wow, that's amazing. To be fair, if anyone in all white with kind of a hood and drapey, but it was subtle. Like I pulled influences from a lot of different places because I didn't want to wear my Yavin ceremony gown. I didn't want to wear that the Senate gown. I can wear those whenever. But I was just like, I was floored. And I said something to him, because again, I had that LARP character who was a tailor. I could use that to talk to anyone. And you can talk to the most evil person if you compliment their fashion. So when I was talking to Croy that first time, I said, the tailoring on the First Order is phenomenal. And I can't remember which ship he's on, but he's like, yes, we have the best tailors on the Imperator or whatever. Nice.
And I had these sneaker boots from Pozu, which they don't make anymore, that are basically their First Order branded Chelsea boots. So they're white boots with a black sole. If you have a long skirt on, and they look kind of like what Leia wears in A New Hope. But if you look at the ankle, there's a First Order stormtrooper embossed on the logo. So I tried to use that to get the First Order TK, tried to get them to trust me, because I was like, oh, you guys have great boots. They're so comfortable. And they're like, affirmative. And they wouldn't. And I couldn't use that to get Croy to trust me. Croy was very familiar with me, but he didn't trust me, which I guess I could understand.
Sure.
But Gaia and Wraith were just, they I was not going to go smuggler, but the first time I talked to Gaia and I gave her, she after hearing her talk about Ryloth, and I gave her one of the handkerchiefs, and I ended up being Gaia's biggest fan. And I think, and one of my LARPer friends was also on a different voyage, Gaia's biggest fan. I think the cast does a really good job of knowing who is going to be comfortable with being in the spotlight.
Mm-hmm.
Like they can tell who's used to being able to improvise under pressure and who's going to enjoy that. Because there's lots of people who, if Gaia says, hey, Gaia and Wraith, like, we need a distraction. Can we have everyone paying attention to you? And there's people who are just going to want to crawl into a corner and die.
Right.
And they knew, I was like, yeah, bring it on. I wanted that. So that, I was trying to be I was lawful good. In my head, I was lawful good. I want to do anything for the captain. I was going to play it by the rules. And I knew the captain was a little suspicious of Gaia and Wraith. But when Gaia and Wraith were asking me to do stuff that I'm like, ooh, the captain's not going to love this. And I'm like, I don't care anything for Gaia, anything for Wraith. And I'm thinking of Hera and Ryloth. I'm just like that planet. They've been through so much. And also keep in mind, you can always add to your backstory as you're going through,
sure,
if you want to add something. And I wanted to be from Alderaan, but being from Alderaan I didn't want to have to, in my head, deal with all the implications of having a character from Alderaan. Because based on my age, I would have been like a little kid, like 3-4 years old. In my head, I didn't want to have to be like, okay, why did I survive Alderaan? I didn't want to deal with that. So I was from Naboo because, like, fashion. And if I was a fashion historian, you can't go wrong with Naboo. So in that reaction, when Guy was talking about her, when we were having a conversation, I think after the cargo hold, I said to her, I'm like, your people deserve to have a planet to go back to. Like, I lost family on Alderaan. When there's a planet people can go back to, you need to fight for that. And in my head, I was kind of justifying. I'm like, all right, I don't want to break the rules from the captain, but I'm like, you know what? Like, what would Leia do? If Leia was here, she'd say, I'm going to help these. I'm going to help. And, we know from Rebels, we know from Leia, Princess of Alderaan, that Leia she was more impulsive. She was so much more Vader. Like, she was impulsive. She jumped in. She did what needed to be done. And that's just like in my head the whole time, that whole voyage, I was like, all right, what would Leia do?
Let's actually start talking about specific elements within Starcruiser. Like, what were your thoughts on bridge training?
Bridge training was cool. And we'll talk about lightsaber training. My knee did not love lightsaber training because I got too into it. But bridge training, my knee was bothering me a little bit. In terms of accessibility purposes, it's fully wheelchair accessible, scooter accessible. You can wheel, but it's not, if you have a scooter, it's hard to sit at the panels. Like, you could sit sideways. So I ended up using my cane and kind of ended up standing on my good leg a little bit, but I didn't even care because it was so cool. So I'm not a video gamer. I'm not coordinated, but what I loved was that the kind of video gamey elements of the shields and the aiming stuff. That was like my 2-dimensional level of video gaming. And I had so much fun with that with my husband, because when we were at a station, I'd kind of figure out, all right, which is the harder one? Like, which is the one that involves aiming and which is the one that's just button mashing? And I would have him do the one for aiming, and I would do the button mashing. And we had so much fun. He always tries to ask me to get me to play video games with him, and I have no interest because my mana pool is crafting, not playing video games. So I think it was fun to actually to do that together. And then on the second night, this was before the spoilers, what I was talking to him about this morning was what was going on when we were on the bridge before dinner the second night. Like, whose missions was that? Wraith dragging us in there? Like, because we were getting the coaxium, like what was going on there? But the bridge training, it was really cool to see how what we learned in bridge training actually worked when we were doing it for real, quote unquote. when we got pulled into that mission. I think that was Wraith and then he got in trouble. I don't know. I don't remember what it was. It's like, I wish, again, it's like a month out. I wish I'd written more down. So I'm like, who did was Hondo there?
There was a guy.
I think there was a X-Wing pilot who looked a lot like Poe, but I don't think it was Poe.
Everyone does the double take. Is that
Oscar Isaac's?
A lot like our
very close.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about lightsaber training. What was your experience in the dojo?
It was amazing, and our Saja was so amazing, and it just broke my heart that I couldn't follow through and finish up that Jedi path because I was just so sucked in by Wraith and Gaia, and then the other Resistance stuff. But it was so cool. Again, for accessibility purposes, you might definitely, I would say, talk to someone who's done it to find out a little bit more. Like, should you bring your knee brace? I should have had my knee brace. That would have helped it for me. But the effects was it was spectacular. I regret nothing, even though my knee was bothering me for a couple hours after the fact. Just getting to just use the Force and not
yes.
like, I'll play Beat Saber on the PlayStation VR sometimes, but it's nothing compared to actually doing lightsaber training and doing the shield and working together and the atmosphere. It was really cool. It was really, really cool.
Well, let's just quick talk about your Batu excursion and using your data pad, and what was your experience with those things?
It was really fun. I was very, very glad that we'd done a couple park days before, because as we've established, I have no sense of direction. And I spent an afternoon in Batu and then like a whole morning. So I wasn't getting lost. I'd done the bounty hunter game with the magic band, and I got, 4 or 5 bounties. And honestly, do that because it'll help you get your bearings. Not on the day of not on your excursion day, but I feel like that's worth it just to not get lost. I did 3 sets of missions. I did the Jedi missions. I did the missions for to get the stone and the coaxium, and the one for Lenka to get the way to shut down, to stop the thing. So I was busy. And a lot of times you'll hear about people who say, oh, go try to just rope drop, get there first thing, go right to Rise of the Resistance and go do the rides first, then use your lightning lanes later. I thought it was really fun to start the missions. And then when the mission sends you to do the ride, it was organic. It was really fun. So in 2019, December 2019, when we went to Disneyland, Rise of the Resistance hadn't opened yet. So on our park day, for ahead of this trip, that was my first time riding Rise of the Resistance. And I was really confused because I was positive that Rey showed up somewhere in that ride. So we rode it twice and I was confused because I knew like Rey was in there on the holo somewhere and I didn't see it. So finally we got to ride the full ride because I didn't know it was broken, that it sometimes it doesn't do the full experience. And it was kind of underwhelming because I was so confused. I'm like, I swear there's more to it. So it was so cool to ride the full thing for the first time with Rey and everything as part of the mission. And then finally be like, oh, I wasn't losing my mind. Like that's how it's supposed to be. So that was really neat. This is where earlier in the spoiler free section where I said, if you have any concerns about your mobility, use whatever devices are going to make things work well for you and keep you from being in pain. Because I could not have done that with just a cane. I would have been in agony. There's a lot of going around. I think you could be strategic and do missions in one area and then go on to the next one. But I was so overtired and like over caffeinated and excited that I just kind of start a mission. I get to the next stage. I wasn't strategic at all. I just wanted to finish everything. And I finished all the sets of missions. We had an Oga's reservation, which was really fun. Because it was hot and we got in there. If you have mobility issues, definitely wait to get a seat And I think they take extra special care of the Halcyon guests because we didn't have to wait long for that.
Right.
But we went back pretty early because our photo session was at 1. Our photos were between 1 and 2. And I wish I want to go back just to hang out on Batu because I was so rushed when we went to the park and we were there. Sure. It's just magic. But I don't want to go down there and just go to Batu because the whole time I'll be like, oh, the Starcruiser is so close.
It's just right there.
I know.
I just wish that I had actually written down specifically what all my choices were, because when we go shortly for our second voyage, I don't want to accidentally do the same things.
Sure.
If I choose to do those things, great. But I don't want to just be like, close my eyes, dart, because I to go verklempt to make a choice.
Right, sure.
And I'm like,
wait, why am I here with you, Croy?
Well, here's the thing I can tell you from LARPing is, and granted, our stories are different. You're never going to have the exact same experience. You will sometimes have modules that run and rerun, and it's never exactly the same. I think I could go back and do the same character, do the same things, but I would have a different experience because the actors are not the same person every time. They're not going to think of the same witty one-liners every single time. So I wouldn't stress about it. I mean, I'm still stressing about it for when I go next, even though I'm saying don't stress about it. It's natural to stress about that. But when you're telling a story like that, as long as you're not going in and you're set like, no, I'm only going to do this and I'm only going to do that, that's when you're not going to have fun. If you've already made a decision, you've set yourself up for failure. It's like folks who know what they want out of new movies or new TV shows, and then they're miserable when they come out. No, you've got to go with the flow. And that's definitely one of the things I learned with LARPing is if I have in my head the way I think a plot is going to go, the way I think a story is going to go with the players, I guarantee you they're going to completely misinterpret things. It's going to be completely different. And in the end, it's honestly going to be better than what I had originally come up with. And I think that's how you have to go with it in the Halcyon is think, okay, like, you know how basically, Han and Leia living their lives. They know how they want things to go. Things go horribly wrong, but in the end, it, for the most part, works out better.
Yeah, and to paraphrase Luke in The Last Jedi, this is not going to go how you think it's going to.
Exactly. You've got to have that Jedi level Zen thing going on. And partly, so one of our roommates, her name was also Jen, because everyone's named Jen. So I decided just to be simple, I'd be Zen. And there were definitely moments where I had to stop and think to myself, okay, my name is Zen. Like when my husband was running late to lightsaber training, I'm like, I'm gonna be Zen about this. If he misses lightsaber training for this very expensive experience and they can't reschedule him, whatever, it's fine. I'm gonna be Zen. And you have to go with the flow because nothing's predictable. Just even regular live theater, when there's a script and blocking, things go wrong. You get hit in the head with a lamp. You keep acting. Not that that's happened to me. You just keep acting.
So what was your favorite part of the story? It sounds like you were part of several different storylines. What was your favorite part?
So my favorite part, and so I talked about reading Princess and the Scoundrel and how that was really important. Like when you're on the Halcyon, if you talk to the captain, and if you hear about that piece of art looking out in the atrium, you know that Leia and Han were on the Halcyon. It's also being advertised very heavily in real life. So when I got a chance to first talk to the captain, learning kind of the small bit of the story that she's still in contact with Leia, that she's still friends with Leia, that just destroyed me. Because where the story happens, all the characters who die in The Last Jedi are still alive. And in literature, when you're studying literature, there's something called the literary present. When you're writing about a story, you're always writing about it in the present tense. So in that little story detail where the captain was talking about Leia, and I'd given the captain one of my handkerchiefs, and she said, "Oh, Leia would love this." And I was like, "What? That's when I realized she was still friends with Leia." And she's like, fighting back. She's like, you're going to make me cry. And I'm like, you're going to make me cry. But I'm like, I'm going to be stoic. The little detail that the connection that people on the Halcyon still have with Leia is through Kevin. And you send the transmission when you're on Batu to go to Leia. That little part of the story that made it for me in that moment, I'm like, Carrie is still alive. Like in this moment, we don't see Leia. We hear references to her, but because of the storytelling of the captain, because the captain is still friends with Leia, she's still working with Leia. Well, if Leia's still alive, then Carrie's still alive. Carrie's still with us. And when I was having that interaction with the captain, I was like, would you give her one? And I gave her a handkerchief. And I know it's not actually like, but in that moment,
Yeah.
like Carrie Fisher was still there. And for so many of us, that was the first time we saw a woman who just kicked ass. She was smarter than the boys. She was tougher than the guys. And growing up, especially any of us who've had any sort of mental health issues, Carrie was an icon. And when we lost her and when they had to finish out the trilogy with just those small pieces of her, I think a lot of us really grieved for what could have been if we had that movie about Carrie focusing on Leia. And to have that little piece of the story where Leia was alive and we get to help Leia's friend, we get to help the resistance, and we get to help someone who's friends with Leia. It just, that was what broke me. I held it together on the ship because my character didn't want to make the captain cry because the First Order had just arrived. But then the day after we disembarked, when Disney sent me the survey, what was your favorite moment? Like and for me, this is my favorite moment. My favorite part of that story, I was like typing on my phone and I lost it. And it's just, there's so many of these little tiny moments on the Halcyon, and they don't have to be big moments. And I don't think you ever really know what's going to get you, what's going to hit you, and what's going to stay with you. I can't even finish the sentence. What's going to make you start sobbing when you start thinking about it, because it's just so real and you're there. So after having had that moment with the captain, like very early on, where she's like, you're going to make me cry. And in my LARPer brain, I'm like, yes. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to, because we like doing that. But you feel bad when it's someone's job. You don't want to. But so later on, I'd helped Rafe and Guy. I'd done the resistance stuff. I carried the coaxium for Rafe.
Nice.
Which I had a big, this is what I'm talking about with capes. I had a big cape. So it was so easy to hide it under the cape. And then the captain comes over and is like, what's that? Because we have the coaxium on the floor in the corner of the atrium. And in my head, I'm like, I don't remember anything I've done in the last hour. And somehow I put it together. I'm like, Ray, and I carried it and it's here. And I think at that point, Ray was kind of washing his hands with it. He was like, oh, the captain can figure out what to do with it. And she was pissed. She was ticked off. She was furious with him because she thought he hadn't warned us about the danger of the coaxium. And I was very much like, I don't want to disappoint the captain. I'm lawful good for the captain. Like, I will do anything unless Rafe and Gaia convince me to do something, but like anything for the captain. So she was livid and I was trying to talk her down. I'm like, look, we knew exactly what danger we were in. We knew exactly the risks. We know what coaxium is capable of. Like in my head, I'm like, I've seen Solo. I know all about coaxium. But I said to her, I'm like, he warned us. I knew exactly what I was doing. I knew what the danger was. And she's like, well, it's my job to protect my passengers. And I stopped her and I'm like, look, you've had other passengers who are willing to risk their lives to do the right thing. You know, Han and Leia, who we know have been passengers in the Halcyon. I don't think it's a spoiler for the book to assume that Leia's going to do dangerous stuff if she's on a ship somewhere. So I said, I'm like, you've had other passengers. And she knew I was talking about Leia. And I said to her, look, you don't have to do all of this on your own. It's okay to let people help you. And that was a moment. And if you're used to LARPing, you're used to taking stuff that's going on with yourself and putting it into that. And letting people help me, letting people share the danger, to share the risk, to help me and to help others is really, really hard. And I looked at the captain. I almost feel it. I almost remember as if I lectured her, and I said, "You can't do everything. You have to let people help. You can't take it all on yourself. You can ask for help." And I said, "Leia, we can help you to help Leia." And again, that was another one of those moments. I was thinking about Carrie. I was thinking about how she was she's so few people at the time to be open about her mental illness, to be open about her substance abuse struggles, to be open about what ultimately killed her, and to be an inspiration to so many of us. I mean, she was one of the few women in Hollywood who was willing to start speaking out about creeps and all kinds of stuff that people go through. And she spoke up about it. So there was that moment where I was talking to the captain. We were talking about what happened on the ship, but we were also talking about Leia. We were talking about Carrie and all she did for the fandom, all she did for generations of us who saw her as an inspiration and who found so much strength from her and so much hope. And for me, that was just, I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. And I'm so grateful to the cast member who played the captain, to everyone who workshopped that character and who wrote that, because you can tell they love Carrie, they love Leia, they love Star Wars like we do. And it's just how lucky are we to live in a world where we can share this experience? I mean,
so lucky.
My 5-year-old self could not imagine this, and I'm just so grateful.
So Jen, if people wanted to find you out on the interwebs, how would they do it?
So if they wanted to find sewing resources and Star Wars costuming resources, my blog is jeneyre.com, jeneyre.com. You can also find me on Instagram at Eyre Cosplay, JENEYRE Cosplay. My TikTok is my photography account, but it's been taken over by my Halcyon stuff. So that would be at Eyre Photo on TikTok. And eventually I'll get back to my photography stuff over there. But for right now, it's just the Starcruiser. And those are my main platforms. You can also find Eyre Cosplay on Facebook. I've got a Facebook page. But I love helping people make Star Wars costumes. I love sharing resources for what I make. And if there's anyone who is interested in making a lightsaber cane, I'm Jen Eyre on Thingiverse. So they can find the models that I've gotten around to uploading on there, because accessibility is so important in Star Wars and in general. And it's extra fun if you can have a really cool cane if you need to use one.
Especially one that flips out like a lightsaber. I mean, come on.
Come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for talking with us. I can't tell you how much fun it was. Again, this is a nice support group for us.
Yes.
And I can sense it somewhat was a support group for you too, Jen.
Absolutely. The more you talk, you have to talk about this experience. You can't just go and leave it there. It's with you. It's a part of you. And there's nothing better than being on the Halcyon, but being able to share those experiences and share those memories is a pretty close second.
Well, thank you so much to Jen Eyre Cosplay for taking the time to talk with us today. What an incredibly moving story.
I just love hearing how the Galactic Starcruiser experience has affected people. I mean, we see it time and time again on Reddit, on social posts, on everywhere. But to talk to people and actually hear their stories is just one of the best things of this experience for me.
Well, and we really, really appreciate Jen for reaching out to us. And Christine, if any of the other folks out there in podcast land want to reach the Heroes of the Halcyon, where can they do that?
You can always find us on Twitter at Halcyon_heroes, on Instagram at Heroes of the Halcyon. And please email us your stories, your pictures, questions, heroesofthehalcyon@gmail.com.
Well, it's always fun shooting the poodoo with all the Starcruiser superfans out there. So until next episode, it's our honor. Let's raise our glasses with the Halcyon toast. Tabooite!